My memory is getting better. I'm starting to retain things a little better. So I want to do something on my own. So, that way I can pace myself because I'm not going to go back and do what I did before and just kill my body and just basically say, okay, let's do the same thing again.
Yeah.
My life is way more important than that. Plus, I have a 5-year-old and a 17-year-old daughter.
This is Recovery After Stroke with Bill Gasiamis, helping you go from where you are to where you'd rather be.
Hey, Darren, welcome to the program.
Hello, how are you doing, man?
Yeah, doing good. Thank you so much for being on the program, man. I really appreciate you making the time. I thought I'd get in touch because I really liked your approach when I was following you on Instagram, and I really enjoyed just what you had to say, and I thought it was a good message to share. So I'm curious to know what happened to you.
Well, back on November 28th, 2017, I had a hemorrhagic stroke. The I can never say this still to this day, but the basal ganglia stroke is what it basically it was. I was in the bathroom at my house and basically collapsed. You know, I had suffered with migraines before, so nothing was like abnormal for me. It was just my once a week, it seemed like occurrence that I was dealing with feeling a little weird, feeling a little awkward, having headaches, and just I collapsed. I could not move my whole right side, and it was crazy actually, but yeah.
So you were in the bathroom. Can I ask what were you doing in the bathroom?
I was getting ready to take a bath. Fortunately, I was not in the bathtub taking a bath while that happened. That's probably a saving grace there. So,
Yeah, and were you at home alone?
well, I was not alone, but I was in a bathroom, and it's one of those really kind of like really tight space type bathrooms, and the door was closed.
Ah,
So when I fell down, because at the time, the person that I was married to at the time, I'm no longer married. Long story. We're not going into that. But she did not hear me, obviously, because I kind of fell and I kind of hit my jaw on the bathtub, on the side of the bathtub. Um, all I remember trying to do was like I was trying to talk and I thought I was talking, but I wasn't actually talking. Like my voice was like gone.
wow.
Um, I assumed I was trying to yell and I couldn't. So I remember trying to get to a point where I can somehow, because like I said, I could not use my right side at all. And like nothing on my right side was moving. So I'm trying to move my left side literally in such a way where I can kind of kick the door open because I couldn't get up enough to reach the door and pull it. In the position I was in, I wouldn't be able to open it anyways. And no one could hear me. So I got to the point where I could kind of get the door open just a little bit. I remember seeing my dog at the time, and my dog's not a barker, unfortunately.
Oh.
The dog's like tries to get. I had a chocolate schnauzer at the time, and she was trying to get in the bathroom, but couldn't like get the door open enough. It kept shutting every time I tried to,
Wow.
you know, get enough to where I can maybe slide out somehow. Slide to, get the attention of my other half at the time, and the only thing that ended up happening that made her hear me is we actually had a porcelain toilet paper dispenser. I got to a point where I went with my left hand and tried to lean on it to lean myself up. Well, I kind of was getting myself up a little bit, but it actually broke off the wall. And when it broke off the wall and it shattered when it hit the floor, that's when, she noticed something was going on. And we're probably talking about a 30 to 45-minute span that between
Wow.
me actually falling and everything happening and then me getting to the point to where I did something that, would have grabbed her attention because it was nothing for me to take a 30, 45-minute bath at the end of a day. I worked in the restaurant business. I had come out of a 15-hour day. It was nothing for me to do that. So,
Yeah. So it sounded like you were automatically in a fight for survival. Is that how you would describe it? Because it's sounding pretty dramatic really quickly.
yeah, I didn't know what was going on. I mean, like I said, all of a sudden my right side was just numb. I couldn't do anything with it. I couldn't feel it. I couldn't move it. I kept trying to like move it. I'm like, what is going on? You know, obviously my left side was operational. Fortunately, I was two enough to kind of try to do things, but because the way that bathroom sat, it was impossible to get him move around. So I was trying to get anything or find anything or do anything to either get me in a position to where I can break something, throw something. And the funny thing is, the toilet paper dispenser was the last thing I thought I was actually going to break. But when I leaned on it and broke off the wall, and probably saved my life at that point in time. So
yeah, so the stroke occurred, or the hemorrhagic stroke occurred in the basal ganglia. What
yeah.
actually caused the stroke to occur? Obviously, one of the vessels broke or burst, but what was behind that? Do you know?
They said mostly hypertension due to stress, and I had not really been much on top of my blood pressure for that previous year, but before then it was never a big issue. Anytime I checked it, it was decent. It was a little high, but it was nothing like in like scary range. And of course, at that time, the blood pressure readings were different than they were as they changed recently. They took the normal measurements down, to the 120 range basically. And before, if you had to be above like 140 and whatnot. And I was always so go, go, go. And anytime I went to the doctor, my blood pressure was pretty normal most of the time. So, but I know in the past year I didn't check it much, and I had worked a lot harder during that last year, and there was a lot more stress going on, but with my marriage at the time and everything else going on, I think it was just a combination of things. So yeah, lesson learned.
Yeah, it's always a combination of things. Nobody ever says, oh, only one thing ever went wrong in my life, and it was this blockage or a bleed. It's always us doing and taking on too much. But I feel like, I don't know about you, but I felt like when I was taking on too much, I got there very slowly. So I would add a little bit of the task to my day, make my day just a little bit longer. Oh yeah, then I can squeeze that in, and then I'll just do that. Then maybe I'll sleep a little bit less, not too much. I'm still getting 6.5, 7 hours, no big deal. While I'm only smoking 3 or 4 cigarettes a day, not too bad. I'm not drinking too much, and it kind of comes together in this perfect storm of stuff, and eventually your body says, okay, I've had enough, relax. But it doesn't know how to tell you that when you're not paying attention to the signs and symptoms. It just goes bang. So were you, other than the headaches and the migraines, were you having any other signs and symptoms that something might be wrong, that you're looking back on now and going, yeah, that makes sense?
The occasional like dizziness, but that was likened to the migraines as well. But that was one thing that kind of made me feel, and I would always have like a pain on this left side, right around like the back of my neck, like almost into like the lower head, like neck region. It's hard to really show, but like kind of right around here, towards the last maybe 6 months. So, I mean, looking at it now, it all kind of makes sense. At that time, it's like, oh, I can do it. The last month I was trying to finally get my health back somewhat. I mean, I was not a very healthy person as far as the way I ate, the way I took care of myself, what I drank. I mean, people drank coffee. My coffee was Mountain Dew.
Yeah.
Essentially. And it was like I was almost 100 pounds heavier at the time too. So.
Yeah. So when you're working 15 hours a day in the restaurant cooking, is that what you were doing?
A lot of times it was cooking. Sometimes it was running on the middle of the floor. I worked on Clearwater Beach, which for those it's in Florida over here. It's a very busy tourist area. So like about 7-8 months out of the year it was really, really busy. So you're for 5 to 8 hours a day, you're just constant run. And then of course we had other restaurants on the property that I always had to go to and check out as well. So it was just a perfect storm.
Yeah. So in those 15-hour shifts, in those really long shifts, what do you do to rest, unwind, relax, nourish yourself? I know, I probably know what you're going to say, but I'd love to hear what you were doing as far as, how does the day start, and then what happens, between then and when you actually end up going home?
Well, most of the time I would wake up and literally I would probably be out of the house within 15 minutes. Most mornings that I had to work I was I was up and out of the house before 5 a.m. 2 days a week before 3 a.m. So, and most days at the earliest I would get home would be like 5 or 6 o'clock. A lot of days it would be 8 o'clock. By the time I get home, I would usually grab a bite to eat, try to get unwind a little bit, do stuff around the house because there were usually things that needed to be done, whether it be, like I said, if it was cooking something for me, or I usually went and grabbed something because of time. And by the time I would get wound down a little bit, because like I said, I always took a bath, with some of the aches and pains I had at the time. I would probably maybe be in bed by maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock, and I'd be up some mornings in 4 or 5 hours doing it all over again, usually the same kind of day.
Yeah, because that's what I was doing the numbers. You said you're doing up to 15 hours a day. There's 24 hours in a day. That's 9 hours left. By the time you go home, even run some of your errands, do some chores or whatever you have to do, man, there's not a lot of time left for anyone else or anything else, is there really?
Nope, not at all.
Yeah. So you experienced a stroke, you're in the bathroom, the dog finally gets you out because you broke something and your partner heard it. What happens then? So you find yourself in hospital. How did that happen?
I actually saw the paramedics come in and try to get me out of there. And of course, I was still wedged. You could not actually open the door the way I was wedged in the bathroom. So they kind of had to wedge me out of there, essentially. It's hard to say, but it's like you almost had to turn me around because it really was, if you open the door, it almost hits the bathtub. So I'm in between the bathtub and the door. Yeah. So I remember, the paramedics coming. There were quite a few of them, actually. And basically, they took me on the stretcher out of the house, into the ambulance. And I probably, maybe for another 2 to 3 minutes, was kind of because I was kind of going in and out on the stretcher. But I remember the last thing is I kind of was maybe in the ambulance for 2 minutes. I kind of just looked up. I saw a clock. I don't remember what time it was or anything. And I just went out, and yeah, that was pretty much, everything else became a blur for at least the next 7 days.
7 days in hospital?
Well, I was in the hospital close to a month between the hospital and rehab, but I don't remember anything for the first 7 days. Yeah, everything's a complete blur to me about what I was doing or what was going on. I was apparently conscious, but I wasn't really with it. Yeah. I guess would be the way to say it.
Yeah, that's familiar. I remember being angry because people didn't visit me, certain people that I thought should have come to visit me. And when I asked my wife, why didn't they come? She said, oh no, they were there. They came. They saw you.
Yeah.
They came on this day. They came on that day. Oh, it was like, okay. I had relatives visit from interstate, 1,000 kilometers away, which means they had to fly in and they had to stay at my parents and all that kind of stuff. I couldn't remember it. So yeah. I totally get it. And it wasn't that I wasn't aware or conscious at the time that they were around. It's just that later on, the memory wasn't there. So I couldn't form that memory. And later on may have been, within a month or 2 months. And sometimes even now, it's been since, my first episode, it's been nearly 7 years. It's been more than 7 years. Even now, sometimes I say stuff and my wife says, no, that's not how it was. And she has to remind me because I was around, I was there, but I wasn't really there. Things weren't computing.
Yeah, that's pretty much, I remember my pastor talking to me. And, because I asked him, I was like, you were there, what was I like? Because, I get different answers from different people at times and whatnot, because it was more than the stroke I was dealing with at that point in time. So, and that's another story for another time. But all right, this guy's going to be down the middle. He's going to tell me, because he was there the first couple of days. I'm like, I don't remember anything. He goes, I'm not surprised you don't remember everything. He's like, I thought you were going to make it, but he's like, I didn't know if you were going to make it, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. He's like, but you were just not coherent really to anything. Is like apparently I had some seizures in that first day too and whatnot, but it's like weren't you didn't know what was going on at all. It's like some like okay, because I don't remember anything.
Yeah.
I mean, even this day now, I don't remember anything about those first 7 days at all.
So did you need surgery to rectify the faulty blood vessel, the broken blood vessel? How did that fix itself?
Well, they decided that I guess because of where it was too risky to go in there. And then, of course, there was some brain swelling as well, and they had to let that go down. There was a couple of different things why they decided not to. The actual the opening in the area of the blood vessel that had leaked was almost 4 centimeters. So I don't know why or whatnot, because like I said, a lot of it I did not get. Of course, I'm trying to read like the jargon of, the medical stuff, and I'm like looking stuff. I'm like, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? I'm like, I was like, I don't understand any of it. But yeah, I said between the brain swelling that I was having and where it was actually located, I guess it was just because it was on my left region, kind of in the center left side. So unfortunately, they couldn't go in and do that.
Yeah, okay. I get that, because for me as well, they didn't operate for the first nearly 3 years because they couldn't, but it kept bleeding. So that's why eventually we had to go in and try and resolve it, So it was it was an opportunity to try and avoid it bleeding. It was an opportunity to try and avoid surgery, but because they thought that it should rectify itself and then it didn't after the 3 bleeds, then they decided, there's no other way. It's more dangerous to let it keep bleeding than it is to go in. The risks were far greater to my personal safety, other people's safety, and so on. And it was just like a ticking time bomb. Now, I know you mentioned that you have, you're not currently with your previous partner, your wife. Tell me, we won't go into all the details of that, and that's okay, I get it. But how soon after did you finish rehab? So you finished rehab, and then I just want to get an understanding of what happens then. How does it become harder on your relationship?
Well, I finished rehab. I got out of rehab a couple days before Christmas, and on Christmas Day, I was told that she was leaving. So it's really hard to tell you how hard it is on that side. So obviously it was harder on, my mother at the time, as my mom's like, well, if no one's going to take him and you're going to leave him, then, I'm going to take care of him and stuff. So it was basically my mom at that point and my stepfather that was, helping to take care. And then my brother and sister were helping as well. And then other members of my family. But basically, I can't say how, it was. I mean, we get along great and everything, but I mean, she was pretty much gone from actually probably much before I got out of the hospital, honestly. So,
yeah. So I get that. I've spoken to a few people who have had strokes and then the relationship broke up after that, or failed, or whatever you want to call it. They went their separate ways. And the reason is that they tended to say to me that things were probably going wrong before the stroke, and then the stroke kind of emphasizes all the things that are wrong, because then this person who you're struggling to have a meaningful relationship with says like, I was probably out the door. What am I going to do? Hang around now? And for what reason? And I think it's not a bad thing that people go or decide to go, and vice versa. I know it's difficult for the person going through stroke, but realistically, if you think about having somebody hang around just because someone is unwell and feeling guilty about leaving, I think it's even worse. Would you agree with that?
I actually do. It's funny because over time, as like I said, the silver lining of the stroke and everything was the divorce actually happening. Because would I rather just do it on my own and get my own perception there, or have somebody who might be bitter, or, because now she's got to take care of all this, and like you said, was on her way out the door probably or whatnot. So, to me, it was kind of the weird silver lining of the stroke. It's kind of like, okay, you know what? it's not what I wanted at first, but then more I go into it, I'm realizing, oh, it's probably was the best thing that happened. So
Yeah. Isn't it bizarre, some of the things that you look upon and you reflect on and you think, actually, that probably worked out for the best. How
yeah.
hard, how hard was it on your your parents and your siblings? Did you live near them, or did they have to move near you?
No, I lived near them. We were less than an hour away from where I lived originally with them, so that was not an issue at all. And I have a lot of family locally as well, so that was an issue. My brother and sister both were within half an hour away, so no, that wasn't an issue at all.
Yeah, what kind of support did you need now that you're back from, or you've left hospital? There was an amount of rehab that you had to go through, was there?
Yeah, at the time, I basically did home rehab, and they gave me exercises to do, essentially physical therapy stuff. And if my mom was working, I would have my aunt come down to help, my brother come down to help to go through the different exercises. Obviously, at the time, my whole right side was still numb. When I was getting out of the hospital, I still could not pick up a fork and properly eat anything. I could not use my right side really at all at that point in time. So that's stuff that took a while. I had those little stress balls, little things to, increase your hand strength with, doing the little cards on the table and trying to pick them up with my hand, all that over the next few months and stuff. And, yeah, I mean, that's what I did. And, they led me through a couple of different exercises to look up at, as if the exercises I was doing, some of them got so easy after a while and whatnot. And they're like, well, let's try to, get you to do other ones. But, the only hard part about it is I never really gained a lot of feeling back on my right side.
Mm-hmm.
So my right side is still like extremely numb. Like I barely feel anything. In my foot, I feel a tiny bit.
Mm-hmm.
In my hand, in three of my thumb, my index finger and my middle finger, I can kind of feel, but the other two, my ring finger and pinky, I still don't have much feeling in it. So it's still mostly numb on this side, but there's no pain.
Yep. Is there any muscle tightness? Because I'm numb on my left side, entire left side, same. I've got feeling in my fingers and my toes, but it affects my balance because the foot kind of doesn't know where it is and it doesn't send the messages back to the brain. Can you relate to that?
Yep, completely. Especially like the first 4 to 6 months. They were like trying to tell me to do certain things. Obviously, I had my apparatuses, I had a cane, I had a walker, I had a wheelchair when I came home, just in case, I needed any of those things. But for me, I was worried about my balance. So I kind of just retaught myself to walk. It's funny because I look like I limp. I always look like I'm having a limp, and people think I'm in pain or something. And I tell them, I was like, this is how I walk so I can balance myself. Because if I try to walk normal and just do it like I normally did or a normal person does, I'm probably going to drag my foot, or I'm going to fall, or my ankle's going to roll over essentially. So I had to retrain myself. It's like, being a kid and learning how to walk. It's like I had to retrain myself, but in such a fashion to where I kind of got my balance kind of back, but I still get those periods of time, especially when I get tired, that my balance is a little cattywampus for a while. So, but I fortunately I tried hard enough and walked enough to kind of learn my triggers and my warning signs.
Mm-hmm.
So but yeah, the balance thing was definitely a much bigger issue then. It's still a little bit of an issue now, but over time it just seems to get better and better, but it's still an issue, especially if I get tired. I've got to listen to my body.
Yeah, absolutely. I know exactly what that means. So tell me about what your triggers are and what your warning signs are. So people listening and watching, they're going to, depending on what time of their recovery they're in, they might be overdoing it and still pushing through and then finding themselves being really exhausted or not able to get back on their feet. At least that's how I kind of learned. What are you noticing are your warning signs and your triggers for, okay, settle down, do a little bit less, Darren?
Well, one of the biggest things is fatigue. I mean, just naturally, if you get fatigued, you have the one side of your body you can barely feel anything anyways. So if you're getting fatigued, that side is automatically going to not operate the way you're learning that you've learned to reoperate it. So if you get fatigued, don't don't overkill it, don't overdo it, and that's one of the biggest things that I feel that people need to really listen to, because we get fatigued, and just as people, we just push it, we push it until, whatever happens happens. So I would definitely say, listen to, if you're fatigued, take a break. There's nothing wrong. It's not a race to win. If it's just a baby step, it's a baby step. Sometimes you're going to take 2 steps backwards instead of a step forward. So I just think you got to listen to that. But the fatigue is the biggest thing I've noticed from talking to people when they're relearning, teaching themselves how to walk and how to balance and how to do this. One of the biggest things I hear is fatigue, and they overdid it.
Yeah.
And they should have listened because they were tired. And then when they were tired because they were pushing it, they either had an accident or they lost their balance or something happened. So my main thing was listen to your body, because even though you can't feel the one side, you can still tell when you're tired. And like I said, I don't deal with any pain. So it's really awkward, because a lot of stroke victims I've seen experience a lot of pain. I don't have the pain issue. It's really weird. So I can't tell anything on pain, but just you being tired, you can still tell when you're tired. You can still tell when you're exhausted.
Just be kind to yourself. I think be gentle to yourself. Pay attention. Hey, were you left-handed or right-handed?
Right-handed.
Okay. So that brings another sort of level of complexity into the situation, because everything that you do, write, eat, hold a cup, drink, whatever, everything now, probably, clean up after the toilet, everything now is not able to be done. You have to use your left hand, which works well, but still, did you ever nearly poke your eye out with the fork? Because I had those experiences. Or I would go to rub my eye, and I would poke it out. Did you ever do that?
Oh, how many times I've scratched my eyelid going up in my eye. Oh, goodness gracious. More than enough times. Now, fork, I don't think in rehab I got close with it one time for some strange reason. I was sitting there trying to, balance, put it in my hand, my right hand, because they had that, looks like a giant eraser that goes around the fork and stuff, so you can hold the fork. And why I had my hand up like this, and I almost kind of did stab my once that way, but for me mostly was just going with my left hand to get my, once I started learning with the right hand, I definitely scratched myself quite a bit.
Yeah. Did you ever choke yourself with a toothbrush while you were brushing your tooth with your left hand and almost go too far?
A couple of times again.
I know it sounds a bit weird to laugh at it, but really it is funny when you look back. You eventually learn to do those things properly, and you do it, you poke yourself in the eye less and less. But I did that so many times. It was so frustrating, because now I'm dealing with a sore eye or whatever. It almost wasn't worth it to try and rub my eye or.
Oh yeah, well, it's just funny because like you said, you get so frustrated while you do it, but then you look back on it, and maybe this is just me. I just kind of laugh at it.
Yeah.
I laugh at myself if I do something funny these days, or a word doesn't come out right, because occasionally, usually again when I'm exhausted, my speech sometimes will, I'll think of a word and can't think of it, or something will come out wrong, or whatnot. I just bust out laughing sometimes. Yeah. I just oh well, this is just me. It's my new
hilarious.
normal.
Yep. It's hilarious. So. I couldn't agree more. So how long were you out of work for? What happened with that?
Well, as far as that's concerned, I'm still out at this point because of the issues, the non-feeling issues with the right side and whatnot, though I think we're finally to the stage where I'm starting to do something on my own, something that doesn't involve me, because all my whole career was in the restaurant industry. That's what I've done. That's what I've known. And to go back to that, well, that's either virtually impossible or a, time bomb, as you said earlier. It's like a time bomb waiting to happen, essentially. So I'm trying to go in things a little bit differently this time, slow down a little bit. Down here, we've got where people are notaries down here, and I want to get involved with that and get involved in being able to marry people and stuff, and something where they call a notary signing agent, which they work with real estate, down here in the States. And so that's something I've actually started to do recently because my memory is getting better. I'm starting to retain things a little better. So I want to do something on my own. So, that way I can pace myself, because I'm not going to go back and do what I did before and just kill my body and just basically say, okay, let's do the same thing again. Yeah. My life is way more important than that. Plus, I have a 5-year-old and a 17-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
So that more than anything as well. So
yeah, you need to be around for them. That's one of the things what played heavily on my mind. Is I was doing too many hours at work, all that kind of thing, and I was doing it for the kids. Not really just for the kids, but the thing that every parent goes through. Is trying to put them through school and feed them and clothe them and have them happy and all that kind of stuff. So, when there's an opportunity to work on a Saturday or a Sunday to make a few extra bucks, you did it. And then it was like, okay, so I was doing this all for them. And at 16 and 12, they were possibly without their dad. And what was the point of that?
Yep.
It's crazy. And that makes you really reflect and step back. So, definitely I've changed the way that I go about my work and the amount of hours that I do. I try and do less and less as far as hours are concerned, but enough that we are able to cover everything that we need to cover and really not worry about the silly things, because most of the stuff that I was working towards was, a newer car or a bigger house or stuff that in the end really I can't do anything with. I can't take them with me, when I go. All I can do is leave them behind. So it's just crazy that that's really what I was aiming to achieve. And I almost didn't get there. So I totally relate to what you're saying. How long ago did it happen, your hemorrhage?
For about 16 months to this day.
Uh-huh.
So, in fact, it is 16 months and a day or two.
Yeah.
So, to be exact.
So you're still fairly early on in the recovery phase, because recovery is ongoing, but it is still pretty fresh. How has that impacted you mentally, psychologically? Can you talk about that a little bit? Has it given you a bit of a tough time?
Mentally was really tough for a while. I feel like it's getting better. I came across, you see, you're talking about my Instagram, it's called A Stroke of Change. It's something that I did recently because I got to a point where I realized, and I was kind of like this a little bit before, but I was suddenly becoming an introvert. Like, I wasn't wanting to be around people. And if I was around people, I can only have like a short window, and then I would just get like tired of people. Or I would get frustrated, or I would get anxious, or I would just get like, it just didn't feel right. And, I'm different now. I'm not able to get out or do the things I want to do. But the one thing I noticed, and it came down to perception, because I always say that your reflection, people look in the mirror all the time. Your reflection is a direct representation of your perception of how you look at things. So, I got to the point where, what helped me mentally and what helped me emotionally was trying to help lift other people up. It was something I kind of had always done before. And I noticed once my perception about things, I started accepting the baby steps. I started, welcoming it. I started welcoming the very tiny things, the very little things, the very little victories, and, I was even welcoming the times that I didn't have a triumph. And I noticed once I started changing my perception of how I was looking at everything, my mental state, my emotional state became a heck of a lot better. It's like, for me, I felt like my place and maybe my testimony, at this point in my life was to try to help other people. And when I was helping other people, all of a sudden I wasn't as anxious. I wasn't as, depressed or frustrated at things. I felt like my purpose was to start helping. And I was never a person to speak publicly. I would have never done this 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. So it's like, for me, it was definitely really rough at first. But one thing I can tell everybody who is going through, who's been through a stroke before, even if you haven't, quite frankly, you've been through something else that's like major, or catastrophe that's happened, look for the little things first. Look for the baby steps. Look for the little things, start focusing on that. Start focusing on the bigger things. Try to work really hard to change that perception, because once you try to change that perception, things get better. And it comes around, for me, was being selfless, really trying. And sometimes I felt like I wasn't, unfortunately, taking care of myself every once in a while. So every once in a while, I did have to take a step back. I was like, take a break from social media, take a break from talking to people for a few days. You always need to rest yourself. You always need to take care of you at the end of the day. There's no doubt about that. But my emotional state and my mental state's gotten a lot better, but I think it all was because of my perception changing and everything and whatnot. And I notice as I'm helping more people, I'm seeing people, I'm helping, motivating people. And for me, if I just say one thing or just get one smile out of one person, then to me, I feel like I've done something good.
Yeah, it's interesting. So do you feel like you had a really, like an awakening moment that you actually noticed this, if I'm doing this as opposed to what I was doing in the past, I'm feeling better about myself, etc. Because I did exactly what you're saying. In 2013, I started public speaking about stroke, raising awareness, etc. But I didn't realize that it was helping me, but I just kept doing it. And it was bizarre because now I know now, and we're 7 years down the track, but back then it was just instinct, I suppose. I don't know. Did you actually have that awareness that this is actually helping me? I'm going to keep doing more of that.
Well, for a while I didn't. I mean, it was really weird. And my aha moment kind of became about a month and a half before I started, because I had my personal Instagram for the longest time. And, I started a stroke of change, but that happened about a month and a half after my aha moment. And essentially it became a couple of things. I started doing group messages with my personal Instagram to people, and not just like stroke victims, because at that time, there were a few people in the stroke community I talked to right on a regular basis and whatnot, but I wasn't as connected with it then as I was at that point as I am now. So for me, when I started doing these group messages, I'm like, just basically saying, you are good enough, you mean something, you matter. I had so many friends that were depressed, and there were, some I feared were suicidal and stuff. So I kind of took my perception and also likened it all around to life. As I said earlier, it's not just even if someone was going through a stroke. I wasn't just looking for that. I was looking for anybody struggling. And over time, I got a couple of these messages that, thank you, you've really helped, blah, blah, blah. But I got a message out of nowhere. This was about little more than a month before I started the one Instagram page, that was basically this long message about how inspiring I was. And like, I didn't realize it. I'm just sitting here helping somebody. Like I said, if I can make someone smile, it's like that was good enough for me. I've always been good at talking to people. I was pretty much people like, I was the Dr. Phil of our group at times or stuff. It's weird. But, yeah. And it didn't just happen once. It happened a couple more times in that next month. And in 2 cases where people I never even talked to, like at all. And then I got this through Facebook a couple of times too. And so it's like, over time, I'm like, okay, so what I'm doing, my perception that I've got here, I guess now here's the reflection part of it. It's people are noticing it. I mean, because for a while I'm like, all right, I'm just doing this to do this. I mean, do people really notice? Is it really making a difference? But I'm going to keep doing it because it's me. I mean, that's how I've always been. So I wouldn't have changed it. But all of a sudden, there was like that month period where it just kind of all like out of nowhere started coming on. I realized is like, oh, okay, I am doing something. I really didn't think I was that inspirational to anybody. I'm just me, you know. So, but so for me, that was my aha.
Yeah, that's amazing,
That
man. That's amazing because it's similar to what I experienced. And isn't it really, what's the word? Excellent. I'll use the word excellent. Isn't it excellent that the first thing that most people do when they have the ability to feel better and get on their feet, etc., is to reach out. And when they're going through the toughest time in their life ever, they reach out and they want to help other people in the community that went through something similar to them. That just blows me away that, you go through the worst time, with the worst day of your life when you have a stroke, and any other illness, let's face it, when you get diagnosed with something terrible, whatever it is, and that's okay. But it's like, and then you go, oh, well, how can I help other people? That is the most bizarre thing, but it happens over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's like when you hit rock bottom, you really don't want anybody else to have to hit that.
Yeah.
Or if you see somebody there, you suddenly want to try to pick that person up. And it's just that's because you've seen rock bottom. You've seen basically death almost flash in front of your eyes, in your opinion. You don't want to see anybody else there. So I agree.
That's such an amazing thing that, the human condition, and I call myself a better version of myself. No, not a better person, because I was always a good person. But I call myself a better version of myself because I'm noticing more and more that I'm doing these things, and I'm not thinking about it. I'm not making myself do it. It's just, I think it's our default. It's the human default is to try and lift people up and help people and do all those types of things. And I see it so many times, it's really heartwarming. I really enjoy seeing people do that. And 99.9% of the people that you're posting to or supporting, etc., don't actually say thank you. They may not be ready to be thankful, or they may not be aware that they will feel great when they thank somebody, etc. So it's way bigger than the 1 or 2 or 3 people that contact you and say thanks. There's so many more people, mate, that are just accepting your message and your wisdom, and they're just lapping it up, and it's making a difference to them, and therefore it's making a difference to their family and friends and the people that they interact with every day. That's just going around the globe. So people listening, if you are loving this conversation, at the end of it, drop me and Darren a line. I'll put the links there for you to get in touch with Darren on Instagram and wherever he can be contacted, and drop us a line and tell us that you loved what we did. We're really going to appreciate it.
And like I said, I'm always here to help anybody, to talk to anybody, to have an ear for anybody. I mean, that's just how I've, always been, and I'm willing to help anyone out in any way that I can, because like I said, I've been there. If I can help somebody who either not get there or somebody who's been there have some hope, that's what I shoot for.
Yeah, I love that. Help people not get there is really the best approach, and that's kind of what I try and do, raise awareness about prevention. But that's a tough gig, man, because I don't know about you, but I wouldn't have listened to anyone tell me how to prevent stroke when I was 36, just literally a few months before my stroke at 37. What about you? Would you have paid attention to somebody trying to help you prevent stroke?
Probably not. I'm probably like, oh, I'm fine, because before it happens to you, you think you're invincible, essentially. I mean, you think nothing's going to happen to me. I'm okay, and obviously looking back at pictures and looking back at everything now, it's like, what was wrong with me? I should have listened to somebody, at that time, because did I hear it talked about? Did I hear people talk about things that can happen to you if you let yourself go and stuff? Yeah, I did. But like you said, I wasn't listening at that age.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you need to do now? So, what, and I know you're not on here asking for help, but what do you need help with, I suppose, to get you back?
Oh, help. Honestly, camaraderie, see, there goes the word, camaraderie, community, just, people to be good to each other. I mean, honestly, for me, to have good friends, to have people to lean on, to have a community to lean on, that's what, the stroke community is really good about, especially since I started the Stroke a Change page. I've started talking to quite a few people. I've had people reach out to me, and to me, community is a big thing for me because, there's still those moments emotionally and mentally. I have not dated or been in a relationship, since any of this either. So, there's still those things that you're like, wow, can I do that the same way? Are people going to look at me the same way or whatnot? So it's nice to have the community for the certain things that I know will probably come up at some point, or, I may think, well, am I not going to be able to do it or whatnot? Because we're only human at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, it's nice having that community. And I've been fortunate enough that I have that community of people, again, not just the stroke community, but the stroke community, especially to highlight, we're people that try to be motivating to everybody, and we try to be there and we reach out for everybody, and I absolutely love it. So to me, really the simplest thing for me is just community. I've been blessed. I've been lucky and blessed to make it, to where I have been. I'm honestly, if I deal with the whole left side numbness, if I deal with the slight issues that I still have or whatnot, I'm here. I'm alive.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds familiar, man. That's awesome. Tell me about the kids. The age difference is quite large, 17 to, what was it, 4?
5.
5. How did they cope with all of this? How did your 17-year-old cope with this? And then I imagine your 5-year-old was kind of a little bit unaware, but what did you notice?
With my 17-year-old, she kind of held it in and was kind of quiet about it for a while. And, eventually it took about like 4 or 5 months before we had like a talk about it and stuff. But she's actually handled it a lot better. A lot of our conversations, she'll sit there and, tell me, through everything that you've went through, you've shocked me. That you've come out the way you have, thinking the way you have, stuff like that. She's handled it pretty well. The ironic part of it is the 5-year-old, who at the time was 3 at the time. That was what saved my life. And sorry, she was 4 at the time. Sorry. I did not see her till I was in the hospital. Well, actually, I was in the rehab hospital at the time, almost 3 weeks, and I had not seen her. And if she was there, I was told she wasn't there, but even if she was, the first 7 days, I wouldn't have remembered anything from it. And I literally sat. I heard somebody yell "Daddy," and she comes running from the door yelling "Daddy," and literally goes there and gives me a hug. And she handed me this like drawing, like, 'cause she drew stick figures and stuff, obviously, but it had Daddy and it had me and it had a house and blah blah blah. But I mean, to me, it's funny because people sometimes, again, we're gonna say an aha moment, or sometimes these moments for me, I feel like it was like I kind of woke up a little bit, because at that point I was not. I couldn't tell you 3 words that began with the letter B. I could not, tell you anything simple. I couldn't tell you an animal that belonged on a barn. These are stuff they told me afterward and whatnot. And I wasn't even supposed to originally leave before Christmas. So that was the other thing. And I remember one of the doctors had telling me I kind of just started waking up a little bit when my daughter came. Like literally, and I tell people, it's like, I really truly believe it was like a God thing at that moment in time, that, she was put right there at that time. And it was just like, everything's going to be okay. Here you go. this is one of the main things you got to strive for, you got to live for, you got to do it for. Here you go. It was like, people say they see the light or whatnot, but for me, it's like, seeing and hearing my daughter, I mean, everything just got instantly better for me.
Yeah. I really, I do credit my recovery to my wife, of course. She was amazing. At that time, she just took on a task that she wasn't ever meant to take on. And I'm very grateful for that. But the children is what made me realize, I had this moment where I thought, what would they think of me if I passed away? Would they have been, they would have loved their dad, but their dad was a bit of a bastard, or their dad was a bit of a prick, or angry, or whatever. What would they have thought of me if it all ended then? And when I did that reflection, I really didn't like what I thought they would think of me. And I'm not saying that I was terrible dad. I was a great dad, but I was an angry dad. I was a tired dad. I was a frustrated dad. I was acting out because I made it so important that everything that I needed to do was the most important thing in the world. I needed to get this job done. I needed to get paid for this, and I needed to do that. And then when I reflected on how they would have thought of me, is when it made me start to say, I love you more, hug them more, apologize more. And not only to my kids, but to my wife and the people around me that I know have put a lot of time into me and being my friends and family and what have you, and put up with my, my cranky side, when I was cranky. So now I'm not saying I'm not cranky, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, and I'm not saying that everything goes smoothly. But now when I do it, I do have this massive moment of reflecting and going, oh, wow, actually I misbehaved then, or that wasn't appropriate. I think I need to go and rectify that by apologizing for my behavior and telling them that I love them and giving them a hug. And I think that has created a much deeper, much more heartfelt relationship with my family than I had before, which is the massive true blessing here. Because like your 17-year-old, my son now is 22 and 18, but we are starting to now grow these kids into amazing people because they've had these deep, meaningful conversations that are about truth, and that are about honesty, and they're about everyone is allowed to say whatever they feel without being judged because they feel something. It's just about being able to share and be true and open up, right? So I can really relate to your 17-year-old holding it in for a while because they want to be strong for dad. They want to make sure that you're not worrying about them, but really they've been affected, deeply, at a real sort of, at a level where, we can't even imagine. So it's great that she was able to now come back to you and start sharing about the journey that she's on with her dad, being in this situation. How has your conversation with her changed?
Well, the first, I'll say like 5 months before that time, our conversations were really almost non-existent. I don't know if she just didn't know how to approach it at the time or whatnot, but now, it's like almost like nothing ever happened in a weird sort of way. But at the same time, it's also like, hey, my dad almost died, and her grandfather also had a stroke about 17 years ago, so she knew what her grandfather went through. So and like she was just a baby when he had his stroke. She was literally a few months old. So, she's kind of been through it once, but he survived. He's done very well with it, fortunately. So our conversations, it's weird because I think it's like we're much more appreciative of the time we have together. So, you can tell that there's definitely, a difference in attitude, I guess would be the word for it, over everything. Now we know it's a realization now that time is actually finite instead of infinite.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. And I really love that way. That's a really awesome way to end the podcast. And in a moment when we end it, this will have been one of the, man, I relate to all of the podcasts, but this will be one of the ones that I really do relate to and get because of this, situation with the children, and how, you've come out of being, the same guy as me, the guy that just went out of your way to do as much, to make as much money as possible, to bring home as much, in a way, love as possible, to support, to help out, to grow, to develop kids and all that kind of stuff at almost at your own peril. And I know parents do that everywhere, all over the world. That's what parents do.
Oh, yeah.
They'll give their lives for their children, but it's not worth it. It's not worth giving your life for your children. It's better to be here for your children and having $1 less, or an older pair of shoes, or whatever, so that we can be around for longer and experience these times. One of the most valuable things for me is time. When people give me their time, I am forever grateful for that. So on that note, mate, thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for your time. I truly, really, truly appreciate it. And I wish you well. I'll follow you on Instagram, and I hope to continue to grow, help you grow your community by being active in it. And I wish you all the best, and give my love to everybody, your family, and everyone who's been through a tough time with you, because, tell them that without them, we couldn't do it. So I really appreciate them for helping you be here.
Yeah, thank you. And obviously send the best on your end as well. Hey, made for your wife and your children, they're obviously a big reason you're here the way you are too and stuff. So, we always appreciate the ones who love us through the toughest times.
Discover how to support your recovery after stroke. Go to recoveryafterstroke.com.